When you say God's character is good, what do you base that? How do you say it's necessarily good, as we established? If we say God's character is good based on our reasoning, which is based on God's reasoning, isn't it just God basically declaring himself good?
Okay. The reason that I believe that God is good is because Jesus Christ revealed that, and the evidence is that Jesus is reliable. His resurrection from the dead seals the deal for me. He is credible. He is reliable. He was dead. He rose from the dead. The evidence is you and I can trust him. Jesus insisted God is good. He insisted to be God in human form, and as I examine his life, I see pure goodness in the life of Jesus Christ. So that's why I believe that God is good.
And Jesus declares God good.
Right?
But it seems there's still no preset definition for what is morally good. It goes to God, and God has no beginning.
Right?
But there's no accountability. There's nothing else to say that what he says is good other than God himself.
You're right. God is accountable to nobody. God is not accountable to anybody. Now, I don't like that. Okay? In fact, I don't like the fact that I'm accountable to God. I just like to do my own thing. But then I got to ask myself, Cliff, are you really smoking something you don't want to be smoking here? Like incredible self-assertion, incredible self-absorption. Would it not be wiser to acknowledge that the eternal God is the ultimate authority, not Cliff?
I would say my moral disposition would be it's objectively wrong for children to die, to kill children.
Why? Why do you say it's objectively wrong to abuse children?
Like I said, I don't know the answer. Like, I'm looking for the truth. So I think that that's objectively wrong, but I can't tell you right now why. But I would say, but if I was a Christian, I'd say it's objectively wrong.
Yeah.
And I could tell you my why is God. But then in the Old Testament, children are killed, and I would have to take that as an exception for the circumstances and the times, for the Canaanites, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay.
if it's exceptional morality, how is it objective?
All right, it's real simple. Thanks for raising this one. The reason that the abuse of an innocent child is wrong is because that child has innate value that has been given it by God. If there is no God, that child has no innate value. That child is a cosmic accident. You don't get value out of an accident. You have to have a creator who creates for a purpose in order for there to be innate value. So the reason that the abuse of an innocent child is wrong is because that child has innate, intrinsic value. Because God created that child for a purpose, that's where the child's value comes from. That's where your value comes from. You take God out of the picture and you're up a creek without a paddle when it comes to explaining to me why the abuse of an innocent child is wrong. It's totally relative. It's total prejudice, bias, whatever your opinion is. Now, what I'm appealing to you is the part of you that knows down at the depth of your being that the abuse of an innocent child is absolutely wrong. And if you come back at me with the line that you used, well, ultimately that's still kind of subjective. I'm going to say you know better than that from your experience. I would argue that your experience has informed you from observation that if someone murders an innocent person, a little child, that is really evil. Isn't that your experience? Okay, so I'm appealing to your experience. I'm saying, not that I can scientifically prove that the abuse of an innocent child is wrong. I'm appealing instead to your experience of life and saying, okay, as you have experienced life, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm betting that when you're confronted by the abuse of an innocent child, everything within you reels back in moral outrage and says, evil, absolutely wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not, am I?
No, that's right. I would say
correct. Okay, now what you've got to ask yourself is, intellectually, philosophically, in light of that being my experience, is it more credible? Is it more reasonable to believe that God exists or not? Remember, what we've already agreed on, no God, No objective right and wrong, no evil, just relative subjective prejudice. Do you see why it's so important to believe in God? Because the evidence is God is real. Oh, come on, Cliff, you can't scientifically prove it. You're right, I'm not appealing to science. I'm appealing to the way you live your life every single stinking day of your life.
I am aware that the background of my belief system, of that, the reason I lean towards there being a God is because without it, then the background of my belief system crumbles and falls.
Right.
I can't have it without some sort of higher power.
Good.
And so I don't have any problems with that.
So you're a theist. You believe some type of God exists.
I believe some sort of higher power exists. Yeah, God. And so the problem I have is just the contentions with like the Christian God that you were talking about earlier. We were just talking about the Canaanites and the Canaanites' children. Yeah. And basically, there's interconnected through generations. Right. So like the sins of the father carry on to the younger generations.
Yeah.
But then I would still have a contention with I like a lot of your videos. I watch them. And you use a lot of logic, and you talk about using logic. And so, if I analyze our current system of justice, and my uncle murders someone, and so my uncle is given the death penalty, but then his children are also given the death penalty, I would say that's an objectively wrong sense of justice. Now, I know I need God to have an objective wrong right, but I would say that's an objective wrong sense of justice. And so when I see that same measure of justice in the Bible, I would also say that is objectively wrong measure of justice. And so the God I'm looking for would probably not be that God that gives that measure of justice.
Okay, but remember, God did not judge those kids, those babies. He didn't judge them. Secondly, remember that life is a blink compared to eternity. And the Bible never says that those children go into a godless eternity. They're going to be in heaven. I'm convinced. So they're going to be in heaven. Yes, they suffered some of the negative repercussions of their parents' idiotic decisions. But guess what? So do you and I, just in different ways, because we're more interconnected than we would like to believe.
Does that not then add an alternate route to heaven other than through Jesus Christ? Because Jesus is the only way to heaven.
Okay.
But then does that not add an exception of unless you're killed prematurely, even when you're innocent?
Did Abraham put his faith in Jesus Christ? Well, if Abraham never heard about Jesus, how on earth is he going to be in heaven? Because he put his faith in God to the best of his ability. God takes the death of his son Jesus, applies it to Abraham's life, even though Abraham never heard about Jesus. So there are going to be a boatload of people in heaven who obviously never heard about Jesus, but who in humility put their faith in God. Now, bottom line is, the only reason they're going to be in heaven is because Christ bled and died on a cross. No one's going to be in heaven because they lived a good life. Abraham was a dirty, rotten sinner the same way I am. But he put his faith in God, and God forgave him, and Abraham's going to be in heaven. So we're not opening an alternate route here. We're pointing out that consistently throughout the Bible, God looks for faith in people to the best of your ability with all the information that you have. In other words, sir, no one's going to hell because they did not hear about Christ. Nobody. The only reason people go to hell is because they choose to live their life separate from God. And on the day of judgment, God says, your will be done. You chose to live your life separate from me. I'm not going to haul you against your will into heaven to spend eternity with me. No, you'll spend eternity separate from me. That'll be hell.